Thank you very much, Angie, and to the Select Committee for this opportunity. My name's Dianne Rogers, and I'm a New Zealand citizen. And I just wanted to talk to you as an individual. I wanted to urge you in the strongest terms to please strengthen this bill. I, like New Zealanders, live with people with disabilities, near and dear to me. My husband is a stroke survivor. My mother-in-law had a severe stroke that left her unable to walk. I'm a 65-year-old person, so I'm a Super Gold card holder, but still very productive. But I know that my disabilities will be coming of age. This bill, from where I'm sitting, feels like a monumental slap in the face for people with disabilities in this country. It acknowledges that they deserve to have barriers torn down to impede them, and I recognise that. It does acknowledge that. Yet it does not ensure that a single barrier is ever really torn down. No matter how many people a barrier hurts, and no matter how cheap and easy it is to eliminate that barrier. This bill creates an advisory committee. And I know from a lot of hard work over the last 9 years that the government gets a lot of advice already on what to do about accessibility. So I think you have the advice, and that we've been giving you advice relentlessly over the past 7 years in particular. This bill shows that the government really hasn't listened, and therefore there is concern about, will the government listen to any further or future advice through a new advisory committee? One more time. As a New Zealander, I've learnt to be humble. You can hear a bit of an Australian accent in the background, and very polite. And I am being as polite as I can be. However, I just want to reinforce the fact about what does this bill tell people with disabilities? From where I'm sitting, it tells them that we acknowledge their predicament, but we're just not prepared as a society and government to take the action needed to address it. You could do a lot more to advance the goal of accessibility. I don't think you need legislation to create that advisory committee. In fact, historically, New Zealand was one of the first countries to create an advisory committee in 1970s legislation. And so here we are. It feels a little bit back to the future. I challenge each member of the committee to stand alone in front of an assembly of people with disabilities and tell them to their faces that all they need and all they deserve is a new advisory committee, a committee with no power to remove a single barrier. And if I could ask you to please do that, because if you can't do that, then please work on strengthening this bill before it gets voted in the House. Let's save time and expense, and let's move forward. You're hearing from the public, you're hearing from people with disabilities, and I think you have the power to amend this bill. At these hearings, and I've been listening into some of the submitters over the past few months, I can hear that you're receiving strong and clear and united messages. Turn those messages into amendments to the bill. Don't delay to set up another advisory committee. Personally, I feel very emotional about this bill and its need to be strengthened, because I can empathise with the people who are, like myself, carers of those with a disability, advocates for people with disability as an ally. I feel in its current state, this bill betrays those people. It's particularly upsetting for me because I know it's betraying young New Zealanders with disabilities. They want a good education and then get a good job. To get a good job, you need to get a good education first and foremost. New Zealand has a wonderful education system, but only if you don't have a disability. Yes, we provide some supports for students with disabilities to try to overcome the many barriers in our education system. However, students with disabilities deserve more. They deserve a barrier-free system of schools, colleges and universities. in which they can truly participate on a competitive basis. This bill does not remove a single barrier they face. I see this bill also betrays the parents of students with disabilities, as they want the best for their kids. They don't want to have to lie awake at night worrying what will happen to their child after they've died. Now they must endlessly fight barriers one at a time while shouldering the challenges of parenting. This bill does nothing for them. A large chunk of my career in Australia was spent in advocating for the rights of older people. This bill betrays seniors in New Zealand. Disproportionately, seniors are people with disabilities. Disproportionately, people with disabilities are seniors. This bill does not remove a single barrier facing people who had no disability in their earlier years, but who acquire a disability as they age. We all do. I know something about this. For a quarter of a century, I was involved in championing seniors' rights for positive ageing and policy developments around defeating ageism in Australia. This bill betrays New Zealanders who have no disability now, but who are going to experience one due to injury or illness in the future. This bill does nothing to smooth their path back from the sudden onset of disability to return to their job, to parenting their children, to enjoying social and recreational activities in this beautiful country, along with their present or future life partners. This bill betrays adults who now have a disability and who are blocked from enjoying all our wonderful country has to offer. They want to contribute to our society and enjoy what it has to offer on a footing of equality. This bill lets the government and private organisations keep on creating disability barriers that block their way more and more. It leaves them to have to fight disability barriers one at a time. This bill betrays all of those who want to see our society succeed economically. Our employers, as we've just heard, want access to the broadest pool of employees possible. Education and employment barriers get in the way, as do barriers in public transportation that people with disabilities want to use to get to work. Businesses want more customers. Barriers block their access to customers with disabilities here and abroad. We want New Zealand to be an attractive destination for tourists. Our disability barriers do not make this country a welcoming and attractive destination for tourists in disabilities. If we lose the business of a tourist with disabilities, we lose the business of their family or friends with whom they travel, even if those others have no disability. And finally, this bill betrays each of you on this select committee. If you don't have a disability now, think forward in time a decade or two, when you eventually get a disability. As I see it, there are two options open to you. It would be wonderful if that future, you could look, if in that future you could look back at these hearings with pride, knowing that you stood up to this weak bill and voted for amendments to strengthen it. The other option is that the future that you would have to look back at today with a crushing feeling of shame and regret because you did not take action to strengthen this bill. Failing to take action would betray not only all the others I have listed, but would betray you and your loved ones. New Zealand does not need another advisory committee on disabilities. The government has been given ample evidence before this bill was written. Your hearings are receiving that advice once again. I know the government has received that advice because I and so many others witnessed it. It is not too late to strengthen this bill. You know what is needed. Create an explicit duty to remove and prevent disability barriers. Define barrier broadly and inclusively.
Dianne, we're running short of time now.
Yeah, I'm almost there. Create a duty, mandate enforcement powers, as other countries have done. New Zealanders with disabilities deserve nothing less. It's not rocket science. Thank you for the time, Angie, and to the other members of the Select Committee. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm sorry, Dianne, we are out of time to ask questions, but good submission, and we have heard you. I am now going to hand